For 10,000 years, the Kethmori Empire ruled the galaxy with absolute dominion. Their ships moved like shadows between stars, their weapons silenced entire civilizations with surgical precision, and their hunters tracked prey across light years with relentless patience. No species had ever challenged their supremacy and survived. No world had ever resisted their conquest and remained inhabited. They called themselves the apex predators of space, the final word in evolution's cruel game. Every alien race they encountered fell within decades. Some fought briefly before extinction, others surrendered immediately, but all followed the same inevitable pattern of defeat and absorption into the empire. Then, they found a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. The humans living there had barely begun to explore their own solar system. They possessed no faster-than-light travel, no energy shields, no plasma weapons. By every measure the Kethmori had ever used, humanity should have fallen within days. Instead, something unprecedented happened. The hunters became the hunted. The apex predators discovered they weren't alone at the top of the food chain. And the galaxy learned that sometimes, the most dangerous creatures are the ones that look harmless until you corner them. This is the story of how humanity taught the universe a lesson 10,000 years in the making. Never assume you know what a species is capable of until you see them fight with their backs against the wall. Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Void Reaper, watching the third planet of this unremarkable system rotate slowly on the main display. The blue and green world looked peaceful, almost beautiful, but the Kethmori commander felt only the familiar stirring of anticipation that came before a hunt. Preliminary scans complete, Admiral, reported his intelligence officer, her scaled fingers dancing across holographic displays. The dominant species appears to be bipedal mammals. No evidence of faster-than-light capability. No planetary defense grid. Their most advanced weapons appear to be chemical explosives and kinetic projectiles. Zethkar's mandibles clicked in what his species considered amusement. How disappointing. I had hoped for something more entertaining after the long journey from the outer rim. The intelligence officer continued her report. Population approximately 7 billion spread across several continents. They appear to be divided into multiple nation-states, many of which are currently engaged in various conflicts with each other. Excellent, Zethkar purred, his yellow eyes gleaming. A fractured species fighting amongst themselves will fall even faster than usual. How long do you estimate until complete subjugation? Given their primitive technology and political divisions, I would estimate no more than 3 standard cycles, Admiral. Possibly fewer if we target their major population centers first. The bridge fell silent except for the low hum of the ship systems. Around them, 47 other Kethmori vessels hung in the darkness beyond the system's asteroid belt, their sleek forms nearly invisible against the void. It was a small fleet by imperial standards, but more than sufficient for conquering a pre-FTL civilization. Zethkar had overseen the conquest of dozens of worlds during his long career. The pattern was always the same: arrive at the edge of their system, demonstrate superior firepower by destroying a few military installations or orbital structures, then demand surrender. Most species capitulated immediately upon seeing their helplessness. Those that didn't learned quickly when their major cities began disappearing in pillars of plasma fire. Begin standard first contact protocols, he ordered. Target their largest population center and prepare a demonstration strike. Something visible but not immediately lethal. We want them to understand their situation before we begin serious negotiations. Admiral called the tactical officer from his station. I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from the planet's surface. Multiple locations. Zethkar turned, his interest piqued. Unusual how? They appear to be launching something. Primitive rocket technology, but in significant quantities. Hundreds of launches occurring simultaneously across multiple continents. The main screen shifted to show the planet's surface, dotted with bright flares of ignition. Even as they watched, more appeared, creating a growing constellation of tiny lights lifting away from the blue world. Curious, Zethkar mused. They're launching their entire space-capable fleet at us. How quaint. And how futile. His communications officer looked up from her console,
confusion evident in her reptilian features.
Admiral, I'm intercepting their transmissions. They don't appear to be launching attack vessels.
Oh?
What then?
Escape pods, sir.
Evacuation ships. They're fleeing. Abandoning their planet. For a moment, silence filled the bridge.
In 10,000 years of Kethmori expansion, no species had ever simply abandoned their homeworld upon first contact. They fought, they surrendered, they negotiated, but they never just left.
That's impossible, Zethkar said slowly. They can't achieve interstellar flight. Our scouts confirmed this. The vessels aren't departing the system, Admiral.
They appear to be heading for various planets and moons within their solar system.
Their fourth planet, several moons of their gas giants, even some asteroid installations I hadn't detected before. Zethkar's eyes narrowed. They've already colonized their system?
It appears so, sir.
And they're moving fast. Very fast. As if they've practiced this exact scenario.
The Admiral stared at the display, watching thousands of tiny ships streaming away from Earth like sparks from a struck flint. Something cold settled in his stomach, an unfamiliar sensation that took him a moment to recognize: uncertainty.
Sir, the tactical officer called urgently. I'm detecting massive power buildups on the planet's surface. Multiple locations. Weapon systems? Unknown, sir. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases.
The planet below them suddenly bloomed with light. Not the harsh glare of plasma weapons or the focused beams of energy cannons, but something else entirely. A soft, almost organic radiance that seemed to emanate from deep within the world itself.
What in the void are they doing? Zethkar whispered.
His answer came in the form of a transmission, broadcast on all frequencies in dozens of languages.
The translator quickly provided a rendition in Imperial Standard: to whoever has come to our system, we are humanity. We have been watching the stars for evidence that we are not alone in the universe. Today, we have our answer.
We do not know your intentions, but we have prepared for many possibilities.
What you see before you is not surrender. It is not defiance. It is survival.
We will not make it easy for you to destroy us, because we have learned from our own history that survival requires sacrifice, cunning, and absolute determination.
Welcome to our solar system. We hope you come in peace. We are prepared if you do not. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence.
Admiral, the intelligence officer said, her voice barely above a whisper.
I'm reading massive seismic activity on the planet's surface. It's like they're tearing apart their own world. The beautiful blue planet was changing before their eyes. Vast sections of continents were shifting, breaking apart in controlled patterns that suggested careful planning rather than natural disaster. Cities were disappearing underground, swallowed by the Earth itself. Oceans were draining into newly opened chasms, revealing hidden structures beneath. They're not destroying their world, Zethkar realized with growing amazement. They're transforming it. Within hours, Earth had become something else entirely. Where once a living world had spun peacefully in space, now a mechanical fortress hung in orbit. The oceans were gone, diverted into massive underground reservoirs. The continents had been carved into geometric patterns that served some tactical purpose the Kethmori couldn't immediately understand. The atmosphere itself seemed different, crackling with energy fields that made their sensors struggle to penetrate. Status report, Zethkar demanded. The planet's mass remains the same, but its configuration is completely altered. I'm detecting thousands of defensive installations that weren't there before. Power readings are. Admiral, they're generating more energy than our entire fleet combined. From what source? Unknown. The energy appears to be coming from the planet's core itself. Zethkar felt another unfamiliar sensation creeping up his spine: respect. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a species that would literally remake their homeworld rather than submit to invasion. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. Sir, the communications officer interrupted. Incoming transmission from the planet. Display it.
The screen flickered, showing a human face. Male, middle-aged, with graying hair and brown eyes that held no trace of fear or submission. He wore what appeared to be a military uniform, though of a design the Kethmori had never seen. "I am General Marcus Chen, speaking for the Terran Defense Command."
"You are Admiral Zethkar of the Kethmori 47th Fleet." "Yes, we know who you are.
We've been monitoring your communications since you entered our system." Zethkar's mandibles clicked in surprise.
"Their communications used quantum encryption that should have been unbreakable by any pre-FTL civilization." The human continued. "We know about your empire. We know about the worlds you've conquered, the species you've enslaved or exterminated.
We know about the Altari, the Velkin, the Christek Unity.
We've been preparing for your arrival for longer than you might think."
"Impossible," Zethkar said. "You have no faster-than-light capability."
"How could you know about your empire?"
"The Altari refugees who escaped your conquest of their homeworld 37 years ago were very informative. As were the Velkin survivors, and several others."
"Did you think none of them would survive? Did you assume no one would ever escape to warn the next targets?"
The Admiral felt his confidence wavering.
"You're bluffing.
Even with advance warning, you cannot stand against the might of the Empire." General Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Admiral, you've conquered 47 worlds.
Impressive.
But you've never conquered a world that knew you were coming.
You've never faced a species that spent decades preparing specifically for you. And you've certainly never encountered humanity." The transmission flickered, showing images that made the bridge crew recoil.
Humans in combat situations, not against other humans, but in environments that no species should have been able to survive. Humans fighting in the vacuum of space with nothing but armored suits.
Humans living in the crushing depths of gas giant atmospheres.
Humans thriving in radiation fields that would kill most known species within minutes.
"You see, Admiral, we've been preparing for alien contact since the first Altari ship limped into our system. We've learned about technologies we didn't know were possible.
We've pushed our own development in directions you wouldn't expect. And we've learned the most important lesson of all."
"Which is?"
Zethkar found himself asking despite his growing unease.
"When someone comes to kill you and everyone you love, there is no such thing as playing fair." The transmission ended, and immediately every alarm on the bridge began screaming at once.
"Sir," the tactical officer shouted over the noise.
"Massive energy discharge from the planet. Incoming projectiles. Evasive maneuvers. Return fire."
But the Kethmori fleet had never faced anything like what came at them from the transformed Earth.
The projectiles weren't plasma bolts or energy beams.
They were physical objects, moving at significant fractions of light speed, and there were thousands of them. They struck the Imperial ships with the force of artificial meteors, punching through shields and armor that had never failed before. The Void Reaper shuddered under multiple impacts, her lights flickering as secondary explosions rippled through her hull. Around her, other ships in the fleet were suffering similar damage, their sleek forms scarred and broken by the relentless barrage.
"Damage report," Zethkar commanded, struggling to maintain his footing as the ship lurched again. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Shields at 40% and falling." "Sir, these projectiles are somehow punching through our armor like it's not even there."
Zethkar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The human projectiles weren't just fast or numerous, they were smart. They curved around defensive fire, adjusted their approach vectors in flight, and seemed to target each ship's specific weak points with uncanny accuracy. "How are they doing this?" he whispered. The answer came in the form of another transmission, this time showing General Chen standing in what appeared to be a command center buried deep underground. Behind him, dozens of humans worked at consoles that looked nothing like any technology the Kethmori had encountered.
"Confused, Admiral?
You're wondering how a primitive species could hurt your advanced ships.
The answer is simple: we're not as primitive as you assumed. And we don't fight the way you expected." More impacts shook the fleet.
The dreadnought Star Crusher exploded in a brilliant flash, taking 800 crew members with her. The cruiser's swift death tumbled out of control, her engines dead and her command section venting atmosphere.
Those projectiles you're being hit with? They're not weapons in the traditional sense. They're modified asteroid mining equipment, launched from electromagnetic rails that we built inside hollowed-out moons. Each projectile is guided by an artificial intelligence that spent years studying your ship designs from refugee accounts and scattered wreckage. They know exactly where to hit you.
Zethkar felt the cold hand of defeat settling on his shoulders.
This wasn't how conquests were supposed to go. This wasn't how any of this was supposed to work. The question now, Admiral, is simple. Do you want to continue this engagement and watch your entire fleet get destroyed? Or would you like to hear our terms? For the first time in his long career, Admiral Zethkar faced a choice he had never expected to make: surrender to a species he had come to conquer. The hunt had become something else entirely. And humanity was just getting started. Admiral Zethkar stood among the wreckage of what had once been the pride of the Kethmori 47th Fleet. Of the 48 ships that had entered the Sol system with absolute confidence, only 19 remained combat effective. The rest drifted as debris or limped through space on emergency power, their crews desperately trying to keep life support functioning. The worst part wasn't the damage, though watching his fleet get systematically dismantled had been devastating enough. The worst part was the realization that the humans had been playing with them. Every shot had been precisely calculated to disable rather than destroy, to wound rather than kill. They could have annihilated the entire Kethmori force in the first barrage if they had chosen to do so. Terms? Zethkar asked, his voice hoarse with defeat and wounded pride. General Chen's image flickered on the main screen, and the human's expression remained as calm as it had been since first contact. You will withdraw your fleet to the edge of our system and remain there. You will open all communication channels and provide us complete access to your databases. Most importantly, you will explain to your Empire exactly what happened here today. The Empire will send reinforcements, Zethkar said, though even he could hear the lack of conviction in his voice. A full battle group. Perhaps an entire armada. We're counting on it, Chen replied, and his smile was sharp as a blade. Admiral, you still don't understand what's happening here. This isn't just about defending Earth. This is about ending your Empire's reign of terror once and for all. Behind Chen, the command center bustled with activity. Humans worked at consoles displaying star maps that showed not just the Sol system, but neighboring systems stretching for hundreds of light years. More disturbing still, those maps showed the locations of Kethmori bases, supply routes, and fleet positions with impossible accuracy. How long? Zethkar whispered. How long what, Admiral? How long have you been planning this? Chen's expression softened slightly, taking on an almost educational tone. Do you know what happened when the first Altari refugees reached Earth, Admiral? They were barely alive, their ship falling apart, their people dying from injuries sustained in your merciful conquest of their homeworld. We saved as many as we could, but we lost dozens to injuries that should never have been inflicted on civilians. The screen changed to show archived footage from 37 years ago. Kethmori ships reducing proud Altari cities to smoking craters. Refugee ships limping away from a burning world, most never making it to interstellar space before Imperial hunters tracked them down. The survivors told us about your empire, your methods, your inevitable expansion pattern. They warned us that Earth would be next within decades. And they told us something else, something that changed everything. What? Zethkar found himself asking. They told us about the other survivors scattered across the galaxy. Velkan refugees hiding in asteroid belts. Christek Unity remnants living as nomads between stars. Dozens of species, all driven from their homes, all carrying grudges and knowledge that could be useful if properly coordinated. The implications hit Zethkar like a physical blow. You've been in contact with them. With all of them. For over 3 decades, Admiral. Do you know what happens when you give refugees hope? When you offer them the chance for justice instead of just survival? They become very cooperative. And very motivated.
The display shifted again, showing images that made Zethkar's blood turn cold. Ships that were clearly human in design, but incorporating technologies that should have been impossible for any single species to master.
Energy shielding from the Velkin. Gravity manipulation from the Altari. Crystal matrix computing from the Christek Unity. And, underlying it all, something uniquely human that he couldn't quite identify.
You see, Admiral, humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our ability to learn from others, to adapt their knowledge and combine it with our own innovations. Your empire has been creating refugees for centuries.
We simply gave them a purpose. New signals appeared on the fleet's sensors, dozens of them emerging from the darkness between planets. Ships of mixed design, some clearly human, others incorporating technologies from across the galaxy. They moved with perfect coordination, surrounding the remaining Kethmori vessels in a formation that spoke of careful planning and extensive practice. The refugees you created have been busy, Admiral. They've been building, learning, preparing. And now they're ready to go home. Admiral Zethkar stared at the tactical display in growing horror. This wasn't just about one primitive world defending itself. This was about every species the Kethmori had ever conquered rising up simultaneously. The scale of the coordination required was staggering, the planning involved would have taken decades. This is impossible, he said.
The Empire spans thousands of worlds. Our fleets number in the millions of ships. Yes, but your fleets are spread thin, maintaining control over your conquests. And your conquered peoples have been very helpful in providing intelligence about weak points, supply lines, and garrison strengths.
Did you really think you could oppress entire civilizations without consequences forever?
The communications officer looked up from her console with panic in her reptilian features.
Admiral, I'm receiving transmissions from across the Empire.
Multiple sectors reporting simultaneous uprisings.
Conquered worlds declaring independence. Supply convoys under attack by unknown vessels. Chen nodded approvingly. The signal went out when you entered our system, Admiral.
Every refugee camp, every hidden colony, every survivor who has spent years preparing for this moment.
They're all moving at once.
You're destroying galactic civilization, Zethkar protested. The Empire brought order to chaos, unified warring species under one rule. The Empire brought slavery disguised as order, Chen replied coldly.
You crushed independent civilizations and replaced them with a system designed solely to benefit the Kethmori. That ends now. More reports flooded in from across the Empire.
The Altari homeworld had risen in rebellion, supported by a mysterious fleet of ships that seemed to know every weakness in the planetary defenses. The Velkin systems were under attack by vessels that could somehow phase through shields. The Christek homeworld had gone completely silent, its Kethmori garrison simply vanishing without a trace.
How are you coordinating this? Zethkar demanded.
Faster-than-light communication is impossible without Imperial relay stations.
Chen's smile returned, sharper than before.
Admiral, you keep assuming we're limited by conventional technology. Humanity has a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. When you absolutely must find a way to communicate across the galaxy instantly, you tend to get creative.
The display showed something that defied everything Zethkar understood about physics.
A network of quantum-entangled communication nodes, spread throughout the galaxy by refugee ships over the past 3 decades. Each node was small enough to hide in an asteroid or derelict wreck, but together they formed a communication network that spanned known space. Quantum entanglement for faster-than-light communication was considered impossible by our scientists, Chen continued. But the Christek Unity had been working on the theoretical framework for centuries before your conquest. They just never had the computational power to make it work.
Humanity provided that, along with some innovations of our own.
The true scope of the conspiracy was becoming clear.
This wasn't just humanity defending itself.
This was a carefully orchestrated galactic revolution that had been planned and coordinated for decades. Every refugee saved, every survivor hidden, every piece of stolen Imperial technology had been part of a vast network dedicated to a single goal: bringing down the Kethmori Empire.
Your terms, Zethkar said quietly. What are your terms for surrender? Surrender isn't what we want from you, Admiral. We want your cooperation. To do what?
To help us end this war as quickly as possible with minimal casualties on both sides.
You're going to send a message to your high command.
You're going to tell them exactly what they're facing and recommend immediate negotiations. Because the alternative is watching your entire empire burn, world by world, fleet by fleet.
The tactical display updated again, showing the broader strategic situation.
Kethmori forces across the galaxy were being hit simultaneously by attacks that seemed impossible.
Fleets were being outmaneuvered by smaller forces using technologies that shouldn't exist. Garrisons were vanishing or surrendering to liberation forces that appeared out of nowhere and struck with surgical precision.
This is what happens when you hunt intelligent species to extinction for 10,000 years, Chen said quietly.
Eventually, the survivors learned to hunt you back. A new voice interrupted, transmitted from the surface of Earth. It was female, older, speaking with an accent that the translator identified as belonging to one of the human subspecies. Admiral, this is Dr. Sarah Martinez, head of the Refugee Integration Council. I want you to understand something important. We didn't choose this war. Your empire did, the moment it decided that conquest was preferable to coexistence. But, now that the war has begun, we intend to finish it. The screen split to show both Chen and Dr. Martinez, along with a third figure that made Zethkar's heart skip beats. It was an Altari, one of the species his own forces had helped conquer decades ago. But, this one wore human-style military insignia and stood with the confidence of someone who held real authority. I am Commander Thekval of the 1st Liberation Fleet, the Altari said in perfect Imperial standard. Admiral Zethkar, you may remember my homeworld. Your ships turned it into a graveyard. Today, we return the favor. More figures appeared on the screen. A Velkin wearing human uniform markings. A Christek Unity collective node integrated into human technology. Representatives of a dozen species, all working together in ways that should have been impossible given their different biologies and psychologies. You want to know humanity's secret weapon, Admiral? Dr. Martinez asked. It's not our technology or our tactics. It's our ability to make friends with people you considered irrelevant. To give hope to those you thought were broken. To unite the galaxy's survivors into something you never expected them to become. What? Zethkar whispered. A family, she replied simply. And families protect each other. The communication ended, leaving the bridge of the Void Reaper in stunned silence. Around them, the mixed fleet of human and refugee ships maintained their positions, weapons powered but not firing. They were waiting for something. Sir, the communications officer said quietly. Incoming priority transmission from High Command. Display it. The image that appeared made Zethkar's blood run cold. High Admiral Kothmor, Supreme Commander of the Imperial Fleet, stood in what appeared to be an emergency command center. Behind him, displays showed the strategic situation across the Empire, and it was nothing short of catastrophic. Admiral Zethkar, a High Admiral said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Report your status immediately. We need every available ship returned to the core worlds immediately. High Admiral, the primitive species we came to conquer, they weren't primitive. This was all a trap. A galaxy-wide coordination between refugee populations and, I know what it was. Kothmor snarled. Half the Empire is in open rebellion, and the other half is under attack by ships using technologies we don't understand. How many vessels do you have combat ready? 19, sir. But, High Admiral, these humans have offered to negotiate? They've destroyed our civilization. They've turned our own conquered peoples against us. This is extinction warfare, Admiral, and we will respond accordingly. The transmission cut off, and immediately Zethkar's console began flashing with incoming tactical data. New signatures were emerging from hyperspace throughout the system. Big signatures. The Imperial 8th Armada was arriving in full force,
over 300 ships including the massive dreadnought Emperor's Wrath. General Chen's face appeared on the screen again, but now his expression was sad rather than hostile.
We were hoping they would choose wisdom, Admiral. We really were.
You can't face an entire armada, Sethkar said, though he no longer felt any confidence in that statement. We're not going to face them, Admiral. We're going to show them what happens when you escalate a war against people who have spent 37 years preparing for exactly this moment.
Throughout the Sol system, new energy signatures began appearing.
Not just from Earth, but from every planet, every moon, every asteroid. The entire solar system had been turned into a fortress, and now that fortress was revealing its true strength.
The trap hadn't just caught Sethkar's fleet. It had caught the entire Kethmori Empire.
High Admiral Kothmor stood on the bridge of the Emperor's Wrath, staring at the tactical display that showed his 300-ship armada spread across the Sol system in perfect battle formation.
The primitive human world hung before them like a mechanical fruit, its surface scarred and transformed but still ultimately defensible.
Around him, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, preparing for what should be the final conquest of a troublesome species.
Status report, he commanded. All ships report combat ready, High Admiral.
Planetary bombardment systems are charged and targeting major population centers.
The smaller fleet under Admiral Sethkar has been integrated into our formation. Kothmor's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. And the human defensive capabilities? Limited, sir.
They have some kind of mass driver system based on their asteroid mining technology, but nothing that can seriously threaten ships of our class. Intelligence suggests they've been coordinating with refugee populations, but refugees have no military infrastructure capable of threatening the Empire.
The High Admiral nodded, though something nagged at him.
The reports from across the Empire were deeply troubling.
Simultaneous uprisings on dozens of worlds couldn't be coincidence.
The level of coordination suggested decades of planning and resources that should have been impossible for scattered refugee populations to accumulate. Sir, the communications officer called.
Incoming transmission from the planet. Display it.
The screen flickered, showing the same human general who had been communicating with Admiral Sethkar.
Chen, if Kothmor remembered correctly.
The human looked tired but resolute, standing in what appeared to be the same underground command center.
High Admiral Kothmor, Chen said without preamble.
I am General Marcus Chen, speaking for the Terran Defense Command and the Galactic Liberation Coalition. We offer you one final opportunity to withdraw your forces and enter into negotiations for the peaceful dissolution of your empire.
Kothmor's laugh was harsh and predatory. You face the Imperial Eighth Armada, human.
300 ships of the line, including the most powerful dreadnought ever constructed. Your mining equipment and refugee allies cannot stand against us.
High Admiral, you're making the same mistake your subordinate made. You're assuming you understand the situation. I understand perfectly.
You've managed to coordinate some uprisings across the Empire using advanced communication technology. Impressive for a primitive species, but ultimately futile.
Even if you destroy this armada, the Empire has hundreds more. You cannot fight us all. Chen's expression grew sad. You're right. We can't fight them all. Which is why we're not going to. Before Kothmor could respond, his tactical officer called out in alarm.
Sir! Massive energy buildup detected throughout the system.
Every planetary body is showing unprecedented power generation. The main display shifted to show the Sol system in its entirety.
What they saw defied comprehension. Every planet, every moon, every large asteroid was glowing with energy signatures that dwarfed anything the Kethmori had ever encountered.
Even the gas giants showed artificial structures within their atmospheres, structures that were now coming online with power outputs that registered off their instruments. What is this? Kothmor demanded. Chen's voice answered from the calm system. This is what happens when you give refugee scientists 37 years to work together without interference. When you combine the theoretical knowledge of a dozen conquered civilizations with humanity's talent for practical engineering.
When you hollow out entire moons and fill them with technology your empire never imagined possible. The Jupiter moon Io suddenly blazed with light, and something emerged from its transformed surface. Not a ship in any conventional sense, but a structure the size of a small moon, covered in weapons arrays that made Imperial dreadnoughts look like patrol boats.
That's impossible, Kothmore whispered. The energy requirements alone. You know what the biggest advantage of being underestimated is, High Admiral? People don't pay attention to what you're really doing. Your empire has been so focused on maintaining control over your conquered territories that you never noticed the refugees weren't just hiding. They were building. More structures emerged from other worlds. Saturn's moons revealed themselves to be artificial constructs bristling with weapons. The asteroid belt reorganized itself into geometric patterns that suggested massive coordinated defenses. Even Mars, which had appeared lifeless, began showing signs of extensive underground development. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, his voice tight with fear. "I'm counting over 2,000 individual weapons platforms throughout the system. Power readings are. High Admiral, each of those platforms is generating more energy than our entire armada combined."
Chen's face reappeared on the screen, and now his expression was implacable. "You came here expecting to face a primitive world with outdated weapons. Instead, you're facing the combined technological achievements of every species your empire has ever conquered, unified under human coordination and improved by 3 decades of collaborative development."
The first demonstration came from the direction of the asteroid belt.
A single beam of coherent energy, no thicker than a human finger, lanced across millions of kilometers of space to strike the Imperial cruiser Swift Retribution. The ship simply ceased to exist, not exploded or destroyed but converted to its component atoms in a flash of brilliant light.
That was a precision quantum disintegrator, Chen explained conversationally. Altari theoretical physics combined with human engineering and Christek computational matrices.
We have approximately 1,500 of them scattered throughout the system. Panic erupted on the bridge of the Emperor's Wrath. Officers shouted contradictory orders while the tactical display updated with threats that seemed to appear from nowhere. The Sol system wasn't just defended, it was a carefully constructed trap that had been waiting for exactly this moment.
"How?" Kothmore asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your empire made one critical error, High Admiral. You assumed that conquest was the same as victory. You never bothered to truly understand the species you defeated, their capabilities, their knowledge, their potential. You saw them as resources to exploit rather than civilizations with something to contribute." Another demonstration, this time from the direction of Earth's moon. Space itself seemed to fold, and, suddenly, 3 Imperial destroyers found themselves occupying the same physical location. The resulting explosion was visible across the system. Vulcan spatial manipulation technology, Chen noted. They were working on folding spacetime when you conquered them. Amazing what they could accomplish when given proper facilities and computational support. High Admiral Kothmore realized with dawning horror that his armada wasn't facing a primitive defensive force. They were facing the accumulated knowledge and hatred of an entire galaxy, focused through human ingenuity and organizational skills into the most sophisticated military force ever assembled. "Your terms," he said quietly. "Immediate cessation of all military operations across the Empire. Complete withdrawal of Kethmori forces to your original homeworld systems. Recognition of independence for all formerly conquered species. And, most importantly, cooperation in establishing a new galactic government based on voluntary association rather than conquest." "And, if we refuse?" The answer came not in words but in action. Across the system, every weapons platform powered up simultaneously. The energy readings were so intense that they interfered with the Emperor's Wrath's own instruments. The message was clear: they could destroy every ship in the Armada without straining their capabilities. "High Admiral," Chen said gently, "your empire has had a remarkable run. 10,000 years of unchallenged dominance. But every empire falls eventually, and, usually for the same reason, they become so confident in their superiority that they stop adapting, stop learning, stop growing. They become static while the universe around them continues to evolve.
New contacts began appearing on long-range sensors. Ships emerging from hyperspace throughout Imperial territory, not to attack but to accept surrenders and coordinate the peaceful transition of power. The refugee fleet had become a liberation armada, and they were claiming their homeworlds with overwhelming force and precision timing.
The war is already over, High Admiral. Your fleets across the Empire are surrendering or being destroyed. Your conquered worlds are free. Your supply lines are cut. The only question now is whether you want to be remembered as the leader who fought a hopeless war to the bitter end, or the one who chose to end the bloodshed and help build something better.
Kothmor stared at the tactical display, watching his mighty armada dwarfed by weapons that represented the combined scientific achievement of hundreds of civilizations. Around him, his officers waited for orders that could determine not just their fate, but the fate of their entire species.
Communications, he said quietly. Open a channel to all ships. Imperial Code 77 Alpha. The communications officer hesitated. That code meant total surrender, something no Kethmori fleet commander had ever transmitted.
Sir?
Do it.
The channel opened, carrying his words to every ship in the Armada and, beyond, to listening posts throughout the Empire.
All Imperial forces, this is High Admiral Kothmor.
Effective immediately, all military operations are suspended. All ships will power down weapons and prepare to receive coordination instructions from the Galactic Liberation Coalition.
The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity.
Chen's voice, when it came, was filled with something Kothmor had never expected to hear from a conquered species: compassion.
Thank you, High Admiral. We know how difficult that decision was.
But you've just prevented the deaths of millions of beings on both sides.
History will remember this moment as the beginning of something better.
Across the system, the massive weapons platforms began powering down, their demonstration complete. Ships from the Liberation Fleet moved forward, not to attack but to escort the surrendering Imperial vessels to designated areas where they could be safely processed.
Admiral Zethkar's voice came over the secure command channel. High Admiral, what are your orders?
Kothmor looked around his bridge, at the crew that had served him faithfully through decades of conquest, and realized that their era was truly ending. But perhaps, he thought, that wasn't entirely a bad thing.
We adapt, Admiral. We learn. We try to become worthy of the mercy they're showing us.
On the main screen, General Chen smiled, and, for the first time since entering the Sol system, it was a genuinely warm expression.
Welcome to the new galaxy, High Admiral. We have a lot of work to do together.
As the Emperor's wrath powered down her weapons and accepted escort from ships crewed by species they had once conquered, Kothmor reflected on the lesson humanity had taught the universe, that the most dangerous predator is not the one with the biggest claws or the sharpest teeth, but the one that can turn its enemies into allies, its prey into partners, and
its scattered refugees into the foundation of a new civilization.
The Kethmori had hunted the stars without rival for 10,000 years. But they had never encountered anything like humanity's greatest weapon, hope.